All right, we're back for another episode of A Few Points from Perfect. We're halfway through this season. We still know what season or what episode it is.
I think it's season 5. We just don't know what episode.
Yeah, I think it's 9 or 10. And I'm back with my normal co-host. I had the other Chris fill in for a few.
I seen the. Figured that's what was going to happen.
Yeah,
You just went off and left me.
Have microphone will travel. All right, so this episode, I have no clue what it's going to be. I'm going to turn this one over to Farmer Chris, and I'm going to sit back and enjoy the conversation.
Well, we've got Dad with us today.
Your dad.
My dad.
The boss.
No. Used to be.
This is going to be good, guys. I'm thoroughly looking forward to this.
He was the boss. He's got connections with you, and he's got connections with Aaron. So
Yeah.
he's gonna ties into all three of us here. So
Yeah.
I just wanted to
And he's got a lot of stories.
and a lot of stories.
And most of them are on you, and very few on me.
It's because I know them longer than you.
Exactly.
So I guess I wanted to go back to the beginning. You born and raised in Tell City, correct?
Mm-hmm.
And then, so you wasn't on the farm much, besides your grandpa's,
Correct.
and with a medium to low income family. Is that correct?
Very low.
So,
Well, it was a medium, but
yep,
Dad spent a lot of it on alcohol.
alcohol. And then you had 5 brothers and 1 sister, so 7 kids in one house.
Correct.
Through school, I've heard you tell some stories, but the jobs you did just to have funds for yourself to operate or to do what you need to do.
Yes. I started paper out as soon as I was big enough to ride a bicycle and run paper routes for probably 4 or 5 years.
Before school in the morning.
3:30 in the morning, you got up and run your route, and I don't care if it's rain, ice, or snow. And
No excuses.
No,
that's right. And then at 15, I worked for Warner Drug Store. And then from there, I went to the motel washing dishes.
and that's where the Fiesta Grande is now.
Yes, yes. And this whole time, I paid room and board. I mean, in anything I wanted, I had to buy myself. My very first car I bought when I was 15, didn't even have my driver's license. My mom and dad let me buy a 66 GTO. I don't know
They
They were
what.
good parents right there. I like that.
I have no idea what they were thinking, but
They were
Now,
thinking
Pat-
you were going
Pat
to have
is-
wheels to get out of the house.
Yeah, but Pat in a GTO, that's scary.
well, I mean, you know, with the old Highway 37 and alcohol and a muscle car, that was not a good blend.
No. I mean, you got to think, Pat, this ain't a lawnmower. This has got a lot more power than a lawnmower. You can't handle a lawnmower.
Oh, we're already going down that road.
Here we go. Here we
Did
go.
the GTO end up in a ball of fire like the lawnmower?
But I had to prove to my mother that I could make a car payment, pay my insurance, pay her room and board, and still have money for fuel to drive it. I had to prove to her before she would allow it.
So 6 siblings, right? 5 boys, 1 girl?
5 boys and 1 girl.
Where do you fall in the order of oldest?
I was dead center.
Dead center?
Dead center. 3 above, 3 below.
Gotcha. Can I tell my one brother's story whenever we first met?
Hey, he's gonna watch it. He ain't. You're telling the story. I ain't.
I'm not scared of him. He knows how I feel. I'll keep it PG-13, but I've known the Temple clan for pretty much all my life, and you graduated with my dad
Yes.
way before I was ever around. And
Yes.
the Temple family, and correct me if I'm wrong, they're no different than my family, his family, anybody's family out there. You got some good ones and you got some questionable ones.
Well, the thing of it is, back then, we were all poor and nobody knew it.
Yeah.
There was only two rich people in town, and that was the Mausers and Guy Neil Ramsey. Everybody else was poor.
They just didn't know it.
But the thing of it is, after it's all said and done, for my education, I feel like I was very successful.
Yeah.
But life back then was more enjoyable
Different times, all the way around.
than what it is today.
Right.
I mean, we had a deck of cards, a football, basketball, and a gun. We had it made.
Good to
That's
go.
scary too. A gun?
Yeah, let me tell you about that gun.
He was also the target too.
I didn't know we was going to put everything in this. But there was three of us, Western Auto. I don't know if anybody remembers Western Auto in Tell City.
I do.
Us three oldest brothers went together and bought a 16 gauge Stevens single shot. And he allowed us to make payments on it.
Really?
Now that's how we
Well, there was
lived.
three
Yeah.
of you, so if you took one of them out, there were still two of you left to pay for it. He thought that through, Pat.
Yeah.
But back then in town, everybody knew everybody.
Oh, yeah.
And your
Well,
merchants.
everybody looked out for everybody, too.
Well, the merchants, they would help us. I'll never forget on the paper route, you had to be bonded. And I go to a bank to get a $50 bond and make payments on it.
Yeah, but correct me if I'm wrong, I don't want to get too far off subject here, but back then, a lot of those decisions were made local, where now they're made on a corporate level somewhere where people just know you by a number, not a name,
Yeah.
which is a shame.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolute shame. Well, to finish my story, I'm not going to mention names, but before me and you started doing business together, I did business with one of your brothers. And I'll just say I was a little bit leery about doing business with another temple.
Well, I admit they're not all like me.
Well, so
Yeah, they're a lot better. I'm just kidding, Pat. Don't come across the table yet.
I'm a pretty straightforward guy. So we were kind of meeting. We were kind of like a couple dogs sniffing each other out, and I'm like, yeah, I know your brother. And he's like, well, if you get along with him, you ain't gonna get along with me. I'm like, me and you'll probably get along just fine, man. And we have. We got along just fine. So
So then after high school, you had a few other jobs with Whirlpool.
Well, I worked for Sewell Connor the last 2 years of high school. And
That was a service station.
that was a service station, and that was an enjoyable job. That's back when we still pumped gas, washed windshields.
you
and
said you didn't have
checked
a
the
great
oil.
furthered education, but every one of these jobs is education, though, right?
It depends who you're asking. Some people look at it as experience.
Experience is education. I don't
But-
care how
but-
you put it in there.
No, there's some people, if you don't go to college,
Oh, yeah.
you ain't
They're the
nothing.
ones that are still paying down debt and don't know what side's up.
Well, now, wait a minute. I did go to college. And it was, the tuition was the easiest tuition to get into. It was the University of Hard Knocks. And you don't ever graduate, you don't ever get a degree. And by far it's the most expensive education you can get. But it's enjoyable. And
And you probably still didn't get along with the professor either, did you?
He thought he was sick.
but
I'm taking a few classes there myself.
from there, I graduated high school, which I still say the only reason they let me graduate, they didn't want to put up with me for another year. Because I was stirring the pot back into.
Yeah. When we move on in life, I was going to bring this up. You got this paddle on a job. It's the poop stir, and I guarantee you, Pat's name's on the top of that.
Hey, I was good.
He was good. I'll give him that.
So other than summer trips out to Grandpa's farm, you was limited ag
Very limited.
until you met Mom in.
Yeah, we spent, me and my brother, we spent 2 weeks every summer at Grandpa and Grandma's. And if we got to drive the tractor in a circle in the barnyard, that was a treat.
You gonna let them know what they ate for supper or for lunch every day? pretty much was the fried chicken?
Yeah, and if you was craving chicken that day, you went out the hen house and you picked out the one you wanted to eat, and you took it over to the chopping block and chopped its head off and let it flop around the barnyard. And then Grandma, she had hot water ready, and you dipped it in there and you plucked it. And I got news for you, that was some good chicken.
But there was one day Grandma was sleeping and you didn't go through all the
Well, I didn't know we was going to get into that.
steps. Somehow the chicken ended up plucked and it was still running
Well,
around.
we forgot to cut its head off.
Like I said, poor chicken.
Yeah, we thought we'd do them a favor and get started early while they was napping, and we started plucking it and forgot to cut its head off.
Oh, only Pat.
So then marriage come, and then you moved out to the country
Well,
and was told you was going to farm then.
when we decided to get married, I'll be honest with you, we had absolutely nothing. What little money she had saved up throughout her childhood, she paid her college off, and I had a car paid off, and that's all we had.
Do you still have the GTO then?
No.
you got
I
rid of that
went
one
through it, and I went through a '68 Camaro.
He said he had a car paid off. He didn't say how many he paid off. You know?
Man, oh man.
And
Boy, I bet you wish you had them back now. That's
Not-
big money.
not really, because you know what? I tore them up. I tore them to pieces.
He tore him up then. He tore him up. Tear him up now.
And but no, I think I had a '74 Monte Carlo when we got married,
74 Monte Carlo.
and it was paid for. And her parents had an old farmhouse that's set up on Creek Rock in hewed logs,
Yeah.
and it hadn't been lived in for 15 years. And we asked him if we could live in it, and he remodeled it for us, and we lived in it. And even though it was remodeled, I must remind you, when the wind blew, you could see the curtains going back and forth, and it was an old coal burner, and there was no way of regulating it. It was either you had the doors wide open or you was freezing to death.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
it was just one of those deals, but you know, we didn't know any better.
But you didn't complain. You were just
No, we
tickled to
didn't know
death-
any better.
Tickled to death to have
Yeah,
what you
tickled to
had.
death to have
Have
a
a roof over your
house.
head, yeah.
Yeah.
And
It's amazing how times and our standards have changed.
oh
just in a
gosh,
generation.
And before we got married, I was in there with a Harley with a wire brush, brushing the house off the paint. And my future father-in-law come and wanted to know if I'd ever drove a tractor. And I told him, just around the barnyard's all. And he said, well, come on. So we went down at Branchville where he was renting a farm, and they had plowed it the day before. And he gave me that there M tractor, tricycle front end, no power steering, and told me to start disking. And believe me, I got a lesson. When
You didn't want to know how to drive a tractor anymore.
when
still
you
getting
got to
lessons
the
today?
end of the row, the best thing you could do is turn loose that steering wheel, because it was going to go wherever it wanted to go. And you know, we cut all of our firewood. There was three of us, my father-in-law, neighbor, and myself. We all three burnt firewood, you know, to heat the home. And we didn't have
A powered wood splitter.
a powerwood splitter. We didn't even have a splitting maul.
Yeah.
We had a sledgehammer and a wedge and an axe. That's how we started. Well, then we started getting a little bit better, and one day they was going to cut firewood. Neighbor brought his son with him, which they had a saw apiece, and my father-in-law had a saw, and they handed Pat the wood splitter. And I split wood all day. And I'll tell you what, I was tired that day. But
So that was your introduction to farming, though, huh?
yeah, and they each had 60 head of cattle, and we put up all square bales of hay for those cattle. And
2,000 bells a day, I heard some of them say.
we had put up 2,000 bale one day. We put up, but there was two
But the whole
balers
family-
running.
The whole family was involved too.
Oh
The
my
kids was at
God!
home.
Oh yeah. We had 2 balers running and had several on the bottom of the elevator, and there was several up in the loft. And but 2,000 bale, I mean, tell you was tired when you got done.
Oh, yeah.
But another thing was back in, you always bought your fertilizer in bags before you planted, and you had to hand lift them off, store them in the barn, and then when you got ready to plant, then you had to load them all back up and put them in the planter. And it was tough. It was tough back in, but you know what? You look at the generation before that, it was even tougher.
Yeah.
We had it made compared to them.
Yeah.
And then you
Now
look,
these kids these days.
when you look at it today, I mean, there's really not a whole lot of exercise in farming anymore. My father-in-law told me when I started farming, he said, you're only going to get one thing out of this, and that's exercise. And he said a mouthful there.
We'll
you
get
know,
'em- we'll get them back in the dirt business. There's still some exercise.
Oh
involved
yeah,
there.
there's still some exercise there. But you look at square bales nowadays. You don't see anybody small square baling anymore.
Very, very few.
Do you guys
Yeah,
still
but-
do it?
Yeah.
But he's almost
Pat
mechanized.
drive the tractor, or do you put him
We're
in the field?
mechanized, so we don't handle. We're all
Yeah.
machine handled.
Oh,
Yeah.
So then
Yeah.
this was all taking place in the late 70s, and then you started farming some on your own too, coming
Yeah.
into the 80s.
Yeah, probably right about 80, I started farming. And
It's about the same time you start having kids of your own, isn't it?
79, firstborn.
Yeah. That's close.
But back in 1982, Jimmy Carter was president. Farm ground was top dollar. I mean, top dollar. And that's when Pat jumped in. I was paying 23% interest on used farm equipment, which I didn't care. I was hungry. I was so hungry to get started, I didn't care what the interest rate was. And then I jumped in and bought a farm in 82 when it was top dollar. And I'll never forget my wife's uncle come to me and asked me if I thought I'd ever make enough off of it to pay for it.
Do you remember what the price was then?
I give $750 an acre.
what was your interest rate back then?
23%.
23. I was gonna say 25.
Yeah, but that's probably worth, what, 3,500 an acre now?
Oh my God, that piece of ground,
Probably 5 or 6.
probably five or six. It's got paved road, water, it's got everything. I mean, that's
And then we're saying 5 or 6, and that's probably cheap for most people.
And that's actually the farm where my sister Sarah lives. there.
Okay. yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
He bought it in 82. She was born in 82, so that was kind of a distance
Yeah,
where she was wanting to go.
yeah, okay. Yeah, it is a nice piece of property right there.
yeah, it's a real nice piece of property, and
Is you the oldest, Chris?
Yeah.
You're the oldest?
So yeah, we'll cover that real quick. You got 4 kids. Chris has got 3 siblings, 2 girls, 2 boys.
yeah.
John full-time farm with us.
Yeah, John's full-time farm with you, and the other 2 girls work outside.
Off farm.
Off farm, yeah.
Yep. But farming in the 80s was rough and tough.
Well, 83 was the very worst year.
And then that was the drought
That was
too.
a good year. That was the year I was born.
Oh, this explains a lot.
Yeah, well, that's what happened then. In 83 is the worst drought that I had ever experienced. And I mean, I've seen a couple besides that. But in 83, I was young and I worked out and I worked with some farmers on the job at Maxon's. And
You was at Maxon's in 83.
yes,
Okay.
and I was, they was telling me about fertilizer, what you had to do to raise a crop. And shoot, back then, 300 pound of fertilizer to the acre was just about tops for corn. Well, I was going to show those 2 old men how to farm. And I put 500 pound an acre to the, and I got 6 bushel of corn to the acre. That's
And back then, there was 80 or 90 bushel corn was average.
100 bushel was
100 bushel.
was well worth riding home to.
Yeah. But you were
100
at
bushel.
6.
You was a-
I got 6, yeah,
And that was a drought year, yeah.
and I showed them.
Did you still get 50% more? Did they get 3?
To back up, now Maxon's is
Yeah.
a shipyard on the Ohio River here in Tell City.
Was, yeah.
Yeah.
Was.
Yeah,
That
it's,
used welding barges.
yeah, it's through Boilermakers Union.
Were they Boilermakers when you got there, or did they unionize?
No, they was
was always union,
unionized
okay.
for a long time.
But that's where you started your apprenticeship program.
No.
Okay.
See, the Maxons was what they called a closed shop.
Okay.
And you was not allowed to leave there unless you was asked. And well, finally, Maxon's was wearing down to where they wasn't getting any orders, and I got laid off, and then I went out in field construction, and I very first job was up at Merrim, and then in '82 I started the apprenticeship program.
So just
So in 82, you'd been about 29 years old, 30 years old when you started.
In '82, I'd have been about 28, wasn't I?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's when you started out in the field of Boilermakers.
Yeah.
and just to recap, you were hobby farming at the time,
Yes.
and this was the boilermaking or welding was the main source of income.
Oh yeah,
And
yeah,
mom's
yeah.
income.
And,
mom's
my wife worked off the farm. I worked off the farm, and
Yeah.
and we would come back and help my father-in-law neighbor because they was pretty much full time.
Right.
And it worked out nice because if we were working, it was time for my field to get worked. They started without me,
Yeah.
and it worked out nice.
Right. Well, I just want to clear up, make sure people didn't think you were a full-time farmer.
No.
back
No.
then. You were hobby farming back then, trying to.
You know, I don't know if I could ever be considered a full-time farmer.
That was going to be one of my questions. Is Chris first generation farmer or are you first generation farmer? Because you'd have to kind of really, because you got your mom's side, which was definitely a generation.
Your mom's side was always farming, and that's where, I helped a bunch too. But, we didn't inherit any of that property, I want to say. I mean, you pretty much went on your own.
Yeah.
You was on your own the whole time. You wasn't partnership farming with them.
Right.
Right, so what you and John have built up and farmed would probably technically be considered first generation.
I would just say he could be first generation. I'd call myself second generation.
generation.
The only partnership is that father-in-law and neighbor let me use their equipment
Right.
because I had no equipment. And they let me use their equipment for my labor to help them.
Gotcha.
And it worked out.
But-
And my neighbor, he treated me like a son. I mean, you couldn't ask for a nicer
So was
guy.
that Sprinkle?
Yeah,
Yes,
Elvin
which
Sprinkle.
we ended up buying the property.
Right. Yeah.
Well, he stated that we would own that property when he was gone,
Yeah.
and his kids seen to it.
Good.
So farming today compared to 82, which one's rougher times?
They're
Because the ag economy ain't great right now.
I mean, it's so stressful right now. I mean, here, Chris and John and myself, we worked last year, morning to night, every day. And the investment, I'd throw a number out there, but the camera would blow up. But the investment that we made to farm, and we made good money on livestock. Gosh, we made good money. We lost it plus more. And we come out losing at the end of the year. And I would just like to invite anybody to work all year without a paycheck.
But the problem is you can't sit out a year because then you can't get back into the game.
No,
So you almost
no.
got to keep going, right?
Yeah. And I saw a farmer the other day, and he said, Patty said, how long will our equity last? Because we're burning up our equity when we lose.
Well, that's kind of where I was going with the generational farms, because the farms that are fifth and sixth generation that have seen this cycle before, they got the money set back and they can kind of muddle their way through this. But these first and second generation farms that haven't seen these cycles and don't have the equity set back, it gets tough.
Our banker sat down with us last week, and he said a several generation farmer that he does business with, his land and his equipment's paid for, and he lost $23 an acre on corn last year.
No equipment payments, no land payments.
No
and
equipment, no
lost
land
money.
payments, no interest. He lost money. Now just look at us where we're growing,
Yeah.
Land payments.
equipment payments, interest. We got burnt bad. And the other day I was driving a semi, and I sit there and thought to myself,
I'm so scared. He's got time to think.
Yeah.
how dumb are we? The money we got invested in equipment, we could go out and buy 3 brand new trucks and make a fine living
Just driving trucks.
just driving trucks.
But are you going to be happy?
Well, that's what one other person asked me.
But now, in this part of the podcast, I kind of wanted to transition the work environment from 82
Yeah.
to when you retired at 55 to where the work environment is now, because you both are boilermakers.
Yeah, so just to give a little context behind this, me and you have been friends and customers for over 10 years
Yes.
now. He's been working for me off and on for about 10
10
years.
years.
And you two worked together off and on 10 years prior to any of this.
Yeah.
So,
So there's a whole 10 years that we weren't even involved in.
It's messed up because here until about, 7, 8 years ago, I didn't know that I knew Chris from when I was 15 years old. I knew Pat from when I was 17 years old when I first got into boilermaking, and I had no clue that they were father and son. But we're out there, I'm like, what's their relation? Well, Pat's Chris's dad. I'm like, you gotta be kidding me.
That's about what everybody says.
First question I asked Michael, I said, first question I asked him was, I said, okay, who's the father and son in this relationship? I said, I feel sorry for Chris. I said, I know how that pot gets stirred.
So if you're,
Yeah.
28, 29, whatever, and starting in the field construction, how was the environment different than when you was 17 and started in field
Oh
trade?
my God. You know, when I started, I went to Merrim on that new powerhouse up there.
How
And
far away from home was that?
oh my God, that was about a 2-hour drive.
Yeah, it's 2 hours and 20 minutes from my house.
Now,
That's
you
that's
stayed
about.
up there though?
No,
you
we
drove
drove
it?
it back and forth.
And just to clarify here, the majority of the work you guys did, not all the work, but the majority of the work you guys did was in powerhouses.
Coal burners.
Oh yeah,
Coal
yeah.
burners, powerhouses.
I mean, I worked in a refinery. I worked in steel
Trash
mill.
burners.
Right.
But powerhouse was the majority.
That was the bread and butter. That was
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
heart
For
and
our
soul.
area.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
heart and soul of the work.
We've got several coal power plants, or did, along the river here,
Yeah.
but you still
Oh, they-
traveled quite a bit to get to some.
Yeah. I went to Ohio, Illinois, Tennessee. I've traveled
Oh, you've
Kentucky.
been to Hawaii, haven't you?
Hawaii, Texas, Georgia, Alabama.
I never would go that
Florida,
far. I
Baton
never.
Rouge, West Virginia, Pennsylvania. Yeah, a little
But
bit
when I
everywhere.
started boilermaking, about one day every week, somebody would be going like this here, and you better grab your dinner bucket and start walking. We walked out one day a week.
Really?
Yes. We was working for the Japs on that scrubber, and the Japs did not understand union. And about one day a week, we walked out. But back then, the unions were strong.
They were strong.
They were so strong.
They stood up strong for the workers.
Yeah, but the thing of it is, we always wanted to do the contractor and the customer the best job because all we had to sell them was our labor.
Yeah.
And we'd done our best to make them money, but we wanted to do it our way.
Right.
And sometimes you run into a hardhead that just couldn't see it that way. And you had to give him a lesson.
Were you ever the hardhead?
You want me to answer that? I can answer that.
Asking for a friend.
But I tell you what, 9 times out of 10, when I was the hardhead after the argument, they come back and said, Pat, you was right.
Oh, man. I got to get earplugs.
But yeah, I mean, we had to uphold our union as well as the contractor and the customer.
Right.
I mean, it was a 3-way game there.
The interest, I think, with the boilermakers is, some of your outages are 2 or 3 weeks, or sometimes they was 6 months. But every
Yeah.
time you went to a new power plant or a new job, seniority kind of reorganized. You had different
There,
superintendents.
we had no
different-
seniority.
Well, you had different foremen, different superintendents on different
Yes,
jobs.
yes,
Yeah.
your foremans and your stewards were appointed.
Yeah, appointed on.
Yeah, and if somebody was working for me on this job, I might be working for him on the
On the
next
next
job.
job.
It's not like
Yeah.
going to a factory job. Your boss is your boss for
Yeah.
6
Yeah.
years, and
No,
that's you work for each other
Yeah.
on a boilermaker job.
I always tell a young kid in high school, if you're not going to college, you need to get into a union trade. With a high school education, a union trade has got more money per hour. They've got a real good retirement program.
Benefits, yeah.
That's the only way to go. But I would like to recommend them to go into farming, but the only way a young man can go into farming is with these confined buildings.
Paid operations.
And you better be a very good speaker when you go to your banker, because you got to prove to him.
Or be born into it.
Oh yeah, yeah. These generation farmers, it's altogether a different ball game.
Yeah, yeah.
So, did you ever work under him?
Well, I was
Yes.
getting ready to get to that. So,
Yeah.
whenever you started traveling doing jobs in '82. So, how far up the calendar did you have to go where you come out of the gang and start getting into supervision and running work and?
Oh,
His brother became a BA. No.
no, I'll be honest with you. I was working nights on a job, and I might have been, I may have had 8 years under my belt. And the general foreman come up to me. He said, "Pat, I want you to be foreman." And I said, no, I won't. And he said, "Yeah, I want you to be foreman." I said, "You got more people out there with more experience than me. I cannot be telling them what to do." I said, that ain't right." He said, "I want you to be foreman." I said, "Nope, I ain't gonna do it." He said, "I tell you what, you're only gonna have 2 men working for you, and you can pick them." "Yeah, I'll do that." So I got my best friend, my brother. And from there, it just kept snowballing.
way up.
Yeah,
I guess
yeah.
that's another thing to state is it was you and 2 brothers, so there's 3 of you in the boilermaker trade
Yes.
that
Yeah.
that they kind of work together with or cross paths on jobs. So
Yeah.
And we
Which was
both,
pretty common back in the day
Yeah.
to have a.
Yeah.
oh my
family or-
God.
Yeah, there was a lot. Yeah, a lot
you
of
take the
families.
Galehausens, the Hickey's, and the
Bagleys.
Bagleys and the Broomfields, and
Yep.
just a lot
There's
of
a
brothers.
bunch of them.
Yeah.
A lot of brothers. Big
Yeah.
Family. And it goes from brothers to fathers,
Yeah.
They had a lot of them back then. You don't see it as much today, though. You don't see the, like, nowadays.
Well-
Everybody getting in,
well,
they're
your
not really
families are
family.
smaller. I mean, if you hear somebody's got 4 children, they just lost their mind.
3, I ain't got no hair left.
And
Just 2 of them act like you.
Oh, man. Good kids.
and another thing, the Boilermakers is a dying trade. They're trying to phase out fossil fuel,
Yes. Yeah.
and it's getting to be a dying trade. And
Even if it's not a dying trade, they've scared everybody to death.
yeah,
You know what I
yeah.
mean?
Yeah, you can't.
Whether it dies or not, it's
Yeah.
scared
Why would you want to
everybody.
invest your career in something that
May or
And
may
that's
not
what
be there.
happens.
may
Yeah.
not be there? You know?
Because a lot of people that are getting in today, in today's world, is they get in, they're in for about a year, and they see they're only getting to work 2-3 months out of that year now.
Well, you guys can
Because-
work damn near as much as you wanted to.
No,
No, not when he got in.
No, he got in.
It drove Mom nuts when he
Oh my God!
because he gets summer and winter off because that was peak seasons for these power plants. So that's when they didn't want to do shutdowns.
Well, that was the only fight me and my wife had, was me being a Boilermaker. She just couldn't get it, me working 6 months out of the year. And she said, "Why don't you go to work for Malzer's where you can get the same check every week?" And I said, "Okay, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to do this one time and one time only. This is what I make in 6 months. This is what I make unemployment in 6 months. And I'm on the farm building it. Now, can Mosers match that? No. A little bit later, start right back up again.
No.
I feel like a lot of things have changed over the years, but women's way of thinking has not.
No.
and Wapaka was getting started up, and her and I think she had some help from her side of the family. Said, why don't Pat go to work for Wapaka? It's just now starting off. You know, he could really go up fast. And I sit there and I took it and I took it and I took it and I said, okay, I'll go down there and I'll put in the application. I went down there and they said, what position do you want? And I said, supervision only. I never got called.
So before we get into where you two started crossing paths on the job, what are some of the highlights from your boilermaking career? Like, what are some of the big projects you worked on, or some of the things that stand out or you remember?
Meeting me.
Well, when we built Unit 1 and Unit 2 at Rockport, that
Which
was
is, I guess, still the largest operating coal-fired plant in the country, right?
It's the newest probably.
they've got the largest boilers. But now Gibson Station, they got what, 5 or 6 boilers?
6. They got 6.
They've got 6 boilers at Gibson Station, and you put them all together, I think they're bigger, aren't they?
They're a little bit bigger.
Yeah.
If they're running full steam, all units in Rockport's running full steam, both units, Gibson's putting out
But
more.
it's 6
Yeah.
but
versus
not
2.
much.
Yeah, it's 6
Yeah.
versus 2, yeah.
And Rockport got built in the mid 80s or late 80s,
No,
Early to
80s.
mid.
early to mid.
Yeah, started in I think 83. is
82.
82, they broke ground, yes. And then I think by 87, was it 87 they had them going?
Yeah,
87, they were both running full steam, I think.
And that's odd. They're completely
Yeah.
shutting it down and doing something different with it already.
Yeah.
Times are, the things are changing slightly. We'll see how far it goes. But yeah,
well,
it's crazy.
supposedly these new boilers are supposed to be 20 years, good for 20 years. And shoot, they're lasting 50.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, we've had that conversation several times about these things are 20 years past their expected life expectancy,
Yeah.
and they keep.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Well, there's so much uncertainty with all these regulations and what's going on.
Yeah.
But the reality of it is, what a lot of us have been preaching this whole time. You can say what you want to about it, but we can't do without them. They're an absolute
You
necessity
can't.
to our way
You
of life.
cannot do without.
wind and sun is not going to take their place.
No,
They can supplement,
we ain't got enough rivers for hydroelectric.
but they cannot take the place of these,
Yeah, and gasification can't.
Yeah.
Gas plants can't.
no,
They
Well, the
struggle.
only thing they could possibly compete with them is the
nuclear.
the
Small nuclear.
curse word,
Small
but
Yeah.
nuclear. Yeah, that's what
Yeah.
I think.
And that's kind of the
Which is
ruffle
basic-
bug about Rockport right now is converting it to a small
Yeah, which is
nuclear.
No, I talked to Matt, and he said they're not going to convert them. They're going to build
Build
a
new.
third plant.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Yeah, they're going to
They're
build
gonna
a
build
third
new.
plant, and it'll be nuclear, but it's going to be small.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think that's where a lot of them are going is a small. So
Yeah, and Kenny Smith, which that's who we work for at the plant.
Yeah.
Kenny had told me they built it, thought it was a great idea building big, you know, because that one unit's producing all this power.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, talking small or English talk for me, but it produces all this power. But when that one unit's down,
Or
you're
something
missing
goes
out
wrong.
on all this income. Yeah, you're wasting so much money.
That's kind of been
to where-
the trend even with the coal burners. Instead of Rockport being one big one like Gibson Station, going to 6 smaller
Yes.
ones. So if you're down, you're not completely down,
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
which makes absolute perfect.
Well, you
2001. That's the first time I met your dad.
So even Colley's had 4 or 5, didn't they? Or
Three.
Three.
They had 3. Yeah, Coley had 3. Warwick, right next door, they got 4. So you got basically 4 and 3. But Unit 1 got shut down, I believe, in early 2000s. I want to say 2004, maybe 2003. Then it was just down to 2 units at Coley. That's my baby, yes.
So what year did you say you
yeah,
met
when'd
him?
2000. It'd been my first year I dropped out of high school. Was 2001.
So you had about 20 years head start on him.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So do
He's
you
just a pup.
He's seen these guns walking in the
do
door.
you remember the first time he showed up on a job?
Oh, I tried to forget.
And you was a little bit experienced, like I said, you dropped out. You started boilermaker when you were 17.
Yes.
That was your
Yeah.
first job.
My first job, I was working on permit with parents, signature to go to work.
Really?
Parents had to co-sign for me.
Really?
Yeah.
To go
Now,
to
did
work.
they actually sign or did you sign for them?
No comment.
But
Yeah.
when work was really, really good, we brought in those kind of people to help man the work.
kind of people like him.
I guess too, between these two
Strong, smart hands is what they wanted.
parents, his dad would, there was weeks he would travel and stay hotel living at some farther plants. So we built our first confined building operation, hog operation in '95. And that's when you quit packing your suitcase.
Yes.
So then he would only work if it was a 2-hour drive one way. It was the only jobs he would take for power plants.
I had to promise the banker I wouldn't travel anymore.
Gotcha. Because the whole time, this whole 20 years, you're still working on the farming thing
Oh yeah,
in
yeah,
the background.
yeah.
All right, so back to this first time he walked on the job. There's so much he wants to say, but he's not going to.
He's got a better memory than I've got.
You may not agree with his story, though.
You remember walking on the job and seeing this guy?
Yeah, I remember. And I remember what he was doing. He was putting tails on people and putting cones on their hardback.
So very protective.
I do
work.
believe, I'm trying to think, because I was on days and nights, but when we were on days, I thought you had the rigging gang. It was you and, was it? Yeah, I thought you were one of the rigging gang foremans. It was Russell Gelhausen was there.
Yeah, Russell was there a lot. I don't ever remember being a rigging foreman other than Madison. Mitch Woods talked me into being a rigging foreman on nights
Yeah, we were
up
up there on that job together.
Yeah, but I never was much into rigging. I done it, but there's a lot more to rigging that meets the eye.
Well,
I mean, there's a lot of stuff you need to watch out for. Now, I started heliarc welding, and I really enjoyed that. Mike,
Still my favorite.
Well, what's the difference between heliarc and regular stick welding?
Stronger. Heliarc is a lot stronger.
It's a different process,
It's a
though,
different
too.
process, but you can't hardly have a void. You can't have an error. You can't cover it up.
Yeah.
I mean, you can. There are ways to do it, but if you got porosity or if you get, let's say you lose your gas coverage. I mean, you're going to have porosity pinholes popping up, blowing out in
you
your
lose
face.
your gas coverage, you're done.
You're done. And I mean, then you got to burn it out, and I mean, it's got to be clean.
Oh,
Or
yeah.
you go to fire back
Yeah.
up, you're just gonna have the same mess.
And on that heliarc welding out there on those high pressure boilers, all your welds was 100% X-ray.
Yes.
They come in an X-ray.
Yes.
Every one of them.
Every one of
Every
them.
one of them.
Yeah, and now we worked because your older plants that have the min wall, your thinner thickness, so it's a lot easier just to heliarc them all out. Forever, they wouldn't give us a process to heliarc them all out. You could heliarc the root and the hot pass, but then they wanted it capped with stick. They never wanted us to
And
heliarc them out.
without the proper process permit, you couldn't do it.
Oh no, absolutely
You
not.
had to go by their
Yeah,
specs.
yeah. If you didn't and they caught you, you'd lose your welding papers. You'd be done. You weren't welding for them no more.
So did you work under him any?
Yeah.
What
At
you getting
Madison.
at?
We might have some similarity over here.
Yeah. Well, I don't want no fight. Go ahead and put your earmuffs on. I will give you this. He is probably one of the better guys to work for. He was probably one of my better foremen I
so all
worked for.
that
But
says is how bad the other ones were.
no, there was we had some.
Oh,
And the sad
God.
part about it is I had one guy I loved to death, was great, but we butted heads so much on the job. And off the job, Larry Peter, me and him
really?
get along great. But
Yeah.
when we were working together, if I was working for him, we would butt heads. That was the only time on an apprenticeship report I only got 2. You're supposed to score like 36 to 40 for a good score. I scored 2. He gave me 2 points. And all that was when we were bringing the panels in, on the 13th floor, the superheat panels, when we were bringing them in on the 13th floor, he had us keep jumping all this. Well, I was like, this is crazy. I said, we got this table. Why we jumping from chainfall to chainfall to chainfall? I said, we can drift them and we can drag them. So we set a tugger up, and he got mad because we did it without, he was our boss, and we did it, and it wasn't his idea. And he got mad, wouldn't talk to me, said if I ever did it again, I was fired. And I was like, if I had the opportunity to make it easier on us again, I'd do it again.
Yeah.
So you're gonna fire me?
Well-
But he gets so mad. But then we'd go out afterwards, after work, have a beer, and be best friends. But
You know, when I was foreman, they would tell me what job they wanted me to get done. And we was cutting these windows out of the boiler wall. It was for the overfires. And it took a team of welders, one on the inside, one on the outside. And I said, okay, here's how I would do it. If I was doing this particular job, here's how I would do it. But you do it any way you want. Because if you let them do it their way, it's going to get done a lot faster. Yeah. And except for one time. One guy sat there and butted heads with me when I tried to explain it to him.
that was not me either.
And it was not him. And I said, okay, you do it your way. And he screwed it up. And he come back to me, he said, Pat, you was right. And I thought, no shit.
Yeah. Yeah, so I'm not trying to jump forward, but was your last job would have been probably my first foreman's job, the Rockport outage, and
That was getting close to my last
it wasn't-
job. From there, we went to Madison. And that was my last job. Yeah.
So did you work under him any?
No.
we were foremen. Oh, I wanted to. I'm so bad, but we were foremen. I was over the rigging gang, and he was in the penthouse. Had the penthouse, the roof tubes.
Yeah.
You're the foreman over the roof tubes. And yeah, I'd love to have him work for me one time, and it just never did
But
happen.
through this period, you got the nickname of being like Mr. Radio or something because you always
Yeah.
had to have a radio on you.
Yeah.
Well, amongst other nicknames.
Oh, okay.
I mean, you had like Mr. Sexy and.
Yeah.
Oh,
I
do
had
you
all
want me to
them.
get started? But you know, there was a lot of nicknames out there.
Oh, there was.
Oh,
Yeah.
my
Everybody
God.
had a nickname.
Oh gosh, we had Porky and Chicken Lips and
Yeah.
and Creep and Trash and
But Porky, you never call him Porky off the job. I ran into him at the chateau, and I didn't even think about it. See him at the bar, and I was like, "Hey, Porky, what's going on?" Boy, his face got real red. He started shaking. You don't call me that in here.
he told me, he said, Pat, if you're ever at the chateau, come in and I'll buy you a beer. But he said, they call me Hotsy down there. I said, okay. So
Yeah, don't call him Porky.
the next day I went in there on the job and I told everybody, I said, old Porky told me come in and he'd buy me a beer. And I said, I went in one door and he went out the other.
But then, yes, 2010, when you retired then.
Yeah.
Yes.
An advantage of the boilermaker, you could retire decent at 55
Oh, yeah, yeah.
and had several annuity and pension paid
Yeah,
into it.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you couldn't knock the Boilermakers for their pension.
No.
So
no,
what? So you put in 30 years,
About 32.
32 years.
Mm-hmm.
And then the last 5 or 8 years, you pretty much traveled with just one person and welded tubes together as partners.
I only welded with one guy the last 15 years I worked.
15 years?
Yeah.
Okay. So, and when I say partners, one weld one side of the tube and the other
Yeah,
weld the other
yeah.
side of the tube.
Well, in his case, that one person would weld the inside, then he have to come out of the boiler and weld the outside.
That happened one time. And that's before I knew how to weld.
So your guys' careers overlapped, what, about 10 years, 9 years?
Yep. Probably roughly somewhere around
9 or
there.
10 years.
Yeah.
Yep.
And
I wish it would have been a little more.
and how old are you now then, Aaron?
So I'm 41. I'm getting ready to be 42, right? That's right, isn't it?
I'm getting to be 43. I thought you were going to be 41.
And you just got burnt out on it now, or the environment out there is
So-
different again, or?
I'm not going to say when I got in, we were great help. We were the best hands you could ask for. But a lot of us that were getting in back then had a good work ethic. Today,
Wait, no.
today,
No, listen what he's got to tell you.
today,
Oh, I believe this.
you don't get, you'll get 1 out of 20, 30 good hands that are willing to work. Where when we got in, it was kind of the opposite. You had them. You had 2, 3 out of 10 guys that you could tell right away weren't going to make it, didn't belong in the trades. But now it's getting worse. It's like it's swapped, and we don't have them making it through the apprenticeship. We take 40 guys in, and by the time they graduate after their 4-year apprenticeship, we're down to 6, 7 guys out of them 40 guys.
Back when I went in, you couldn't buy a job, especially one out there on construction. If you got a
Yeah.
construction job, fella, you hit the lottery.
Yeah.
And now, if you can get, all they ask for, they only ask for 2 things now. Pass a drug test and work 5 days a week. And they can't do
Yeah.
that. They can't
Yeah.
even do that. And it's I don't know, I don't get people anymore, how they
It's
think.
like right now, the work is out there, but we've lost so many guys that we were at, I don't even know what 3-7, our locals actually got now. We were up to like 6,000, I believe, at one time, members in the state of Indiana. And now we're down probably to 1,200, 12 to 1,500. So the ones that are out there, you can ask him, I'm getting phone calls left and right wanting me to go back to work, because, and we're out of season. We are not a seasonal worker, but we had big outages in the spring, big outages in the fall.
And that's because the temperatures were moderate and not the furnaces
Yes.
or
Yeah.
the ACs was running
Yeah.
Exactly.
on
Yeah.
electric.
So it was
Electric
easier to
demand's
do.
down, so
Yeah.
they can pull units
Yeah.
offline.
And that's where it hurts a farmer.
Yeah, it could. Well, I could have picked 2
But yeah, so we're not really, can't call it seasonal because when we do work, it's 7/12s, 6/10, 7/12s. A lot of times get on jobs, it's shaking hands.
Back in my day, we called it feast or famine.
Yeah. But today's outages, like when I got in, so I got in 2001, so 2002, I actually got an apprenticeship. It was like, I'm talking like 2 weeks after my birthday. My birthday was April 3rd, and it was like 2 weeks after that, I got the letter in the mail. I was getting indentured, be at the Holiday Inn at Dale's, or
Jasper. Yeah.
That's where we had our indenturement. But yeah, so, I got in. When I got in back then, we were working 8, 9 week outages, and you roll straight from one to another.
Just
We
so you
had
got
a
back
lot.
on the list, you got called out again.
You go out right away. Now the outages, they've gotten smaller. Like if you see a 6-week outage, you better jump on it because that's a big outage.
Oh, yeah.
So I think what it is your guys that ain't favored or don't have your Heliarc papers, your tube papers, what we call it. So you ain't got your tube papers, they don't get to work as much. So I think some of it, them guys are, not getting as much work, and hey, I got to do something to survive, and I don't blame them. We got to go somewhere. So they basically drop out right away. You got the ones that could make it, but it's too dirty, it's too rough, too
Well,
hands-on,
that's what I was
something
going to
like
say.
that.
Is it is a somewhat physical job as well. You got a lot of people just don't want to put the effort.
Yeah, they
out.
don't want to put the effort in it.
So
I know-
those days you come home, all you can see is the whites of your eyes.
Yeah.
I know at their Rockport job you was foreman on with me, and I had those rift tubes.
Yeah.
And I mean, tell you, work was great right then. I had retirees out there working, and I would put one apprentice with a retiree. And I said, I don't care if you guys just weld 1 tube a day. I want that apprentice to be able to weld a tube in an X-ray. And I was trying to look ahead into the future.
Yes.
And I think somebody was kind of catching up with me on it, and they started wanting to know their name and social security number, what they got done every day.
I remember that.
And I wouldn't play the game.
But on a serious note, when you got, like, as far as us, our pension, you want to teach them kids that are the, the younger
Because they're the ones that need
tradesmen
paying.
coming
Exactly.
up. They're the ones
Exactly.
paying into your retirement. So
Yeah.
you want to make sure you got some good ones out there to keep it going.
The generation before me, they couldn't retire until they were 65. And everybody knew that was a young man's game out there. But so they took care of the older people the best they could. And this one kid come in, he was just indentured in the apprenticeship program. He come in, and he had shit all over his eyebrows, his nose, his lips, and his ears. And that old man was going to retire here in about a month, and he sat back there and looked at that boy, and he looked at that boy. And I was watching both of them, and I thought, now this is going to be good.
Were they both working for you? Did you put them together?
He finally got up, and he said, hey, son. The boy looked up, and he said, did you trip and fall in the tackle box? The next day,
So you
he
know what
didn't have
his-
nothing on.
So did he actually work or just stir shit all day when you was on jobs with him?
Hey, it's
So-
not easy stirring shit.
So, no, he was actually an okay worker.
Yeah.
Decent. No, he was a good worker. I've watched him work. Yeah, that paddle that started the pot there, he had it a lot of the times in his
Yeah.
possession.
I'll give Pat credit on this. I wasn't in person on all these big jobs, but Pat's really good. Like if he's the foreman on the penthouse, he's really good at stirring somebody else's pots.
Yeah.
And I still have not figured out which ones exactly. It was Simpy, him, and Mike Kyle. But my desk got flipped over and screwed down to the floor. I come in and I'm like, what is going on? Oh yeah. Everything in my desk, my drawer screwed together. All my paperwork's in there. I was like, you gotta be kidding me. So, I mean, and that's where I did a little retaliation. Nothing that bad, but I took all their flashlights and filled them full of concrete. Well, refract. We were refracting doors at the time, and I filled every one of them up with concrete and their coffee mugs.
Old Broomfield, he's the dispatcher now.
Yeah.
Me and Mike Call was working on a job, and him and another boy was heliarc welding there next to us, and it was dark in there. And it was break time, and Mike said, watch this. He took a toothpick and took the tungsten out of Broomfield's torch and put the end of the toothpick in there. And Broomfield come back and we was over just laughing.
You either do that or you take a piece of the Healy wire, shine it up real good, and just take that grinder and kind of put a good point on it like it's a fresh piece
Oh,
of tungsten. And put it in that.
You talk about porosity.
That metal sucks back right into that gasolines in that cup. Oh, they're mad.
You know, back in the early 80s when we was doing Rockport Unit 1, we had a ball. I mean,
Yeah.
they had to hire...
You got work done, but had fun.
We had work,
Yeah.
we got a lot of work done, but they had to hire extra laborers to keep water out there to throw. I mean, we threw that much water on everybody. Out there in the middle of the summer, hot, you know, and we had a good time. But boy, they put a stop to all that.
But back in the stick welding days, you guys put extra leads on extra welders to make them hot or something?
Oh God, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Move around and
You would catch where they splice their leads. There's always that screw hole there.
Yeah.
You could take another lead and poke
Stick
it in
or-
there.
yeah.
And it's not
rod.
like gouging.
give them extra G.
and one thing they done to me and another boy down at Maxon's was they switched their leads
Oh, yeah.
to
Polarity.
no they crossed
just switch their
machines.
machines.
I'd go down there and turn my machine down.
He's actually turned the other guy's machine.
You want to talk about fight? Now, I will say I'm guilty of that, switching machines around on people.
It took us forever to figure that one out.
So what? I know you made a comment about the union back whenever you first got in, and how it labor is what you had to sell, and you guys are proud of that and protecting the workers and stuff. So fast forward today, what's your guys' thoughts on where the unions are at today?
The union ain't what it used to be. And that's, and from the time I started until I retired, I couldn't wait to get out because the change was so drastic from the beginning to the end. I was sick.
So was that safety or the way they treated their employees or the mentality or what was the biggest thing?
All of the above.
Bingo.
All
It
of
is.
the above.
I guess that's one of my, I've worked on union jobs, but I've never been a union employee, but that's one of the things that's frustrating for me is I agree with what you said back in the day. They were strong, they had negotiating power, and they lobbied for the right things. Fairness and safety and stuff like that.
And took care of each other.
Yeah, but somewhere,
Yeah,
somewhere they crossed the line, and I don't know where exactly that was. but-
The unity is what
Yeah.
is not there any longer. It's like I want to make that dollar, and when you belong to a union, money's got no part to play in it.
Yeah.
It's unity. Unity is where your money's at.
Well, and I think somewhere along the line too, they started lobbying for the wrong things. I don't know how else to describe it, but I don't know. Hopefully it starts coming back the right way and gets a little more the way it used to be, because that's whenever shit got done effectively.
Well, unions is what helps everybody. They set the rate, the hourly rate, and it trickles down to non-union.
Yeah, well, and the thought process behind having a skilled trade is awesome. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because me as a contractor, I don't have to put a lot of money into training you up other than whatever fees or whatever I pay.
Exactly.
I mean, I have
Exactly.
access to skilled labor, but I don't know. Something got out of balance somewhere. I don't know where, but hopefully we can get it back in balance at some point.
I was Gibson Station. I was the rigging foreman, which I told you I didn't do much, but I was.
Here we
I was
go.
on
I
that
was
job,
on
too.
that job. I was.
That was Red Hats, wasn't it? Or was that Sterling?
No, it wasn't Sterling.
Foster Wheeler, wasn't it?
No, it was that bunch out of Madison who worked up there.
Oh, Intervab?
Interfab had that
Okay.
job.
Yeah.
Earl Swartz was the general foreman. He set me up as foreman, rigging foreman. And this unit was union. The unit next to it, same job, was non-union. And I thought, I've never been around non-union. I'm just going to walk over there and kind of scope it out. And I had figured they had 4 people hired for every one union man we had hired over here. And I thought, how could they do it cheaper? I never did understand that. They done everything the hard way. Everything the non-union done over there, they done the hard way. And I heard one of the welders say, if we get a bad picture, we're fired. Well, everybody's going to have a bad picture
Yeah, you're gonna get a bad shot.
once in a while. And I thought,
If you ain't had a bad shot, a couple dozen of them, you ain't a welder.
yeah,
You know what I mean?
And that's X-ray you're talking.
X-ray,
yeah,
yeah.
X-ray, yeah.
Well,
yeah.
that's one of the things. If you made a mistake, at least you did something.
Yeah.
I mean, that's more than what we say about a lot of people nowadays.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, old Goldie, he was general foreman down there at Rockport on nights, and he said, boy, he said, they're towards the end. Man, I'd like to have some of those guys I fired. I love that pretty good statement. That's how much things had changed.
Yeah, they have.
Well, let's before we run out of time here, let's
Oh, we keep going. We're on
no.
good subject here.
let's fast forward to I guess your post retirement. You kind of turned over the foreman reins to Aaron over here.
He seen me come in the door with that white hat on, that radio. He said, I'm done. There ain't nothing I can do anymore. And I forced him into retirement.
I'll tell you what I done. Here's what I done.
Yeah, he did. I'm losing my job. I gotta
First thing I said whenever I showed up on a Farmer Chris job with him, Pat goes, "You better get that boy a radio. He ain't gonna do nothing."
go. We got 6 of them over there on the
We
cabinet.
got over there.
I'll never forget down there down there. We was working on the precip. And did you know old Boar?
Oh, yeah, board.
Boar thought he should have been set up as foreman, and they wouldn't set him up for foreman for hell. He went and got a tube before and put a welder rod in the top of it, put it in his back. That was his radio. We stood there and laughed.
Yeah, we still do that today.
I guess I must be a worse boss than you were because he says he retired from the wrong occupation.
Well, and here I'll tell you why. I don't get a day off farming. When I was boilermaking, I got 6 months off.
How's the pay?
Yeah.
Pay very good either.
So you gotta pay to work.
Well, you know, as you get older, I'll go ahead and clue you in. As you get older, you start screwing up. And I screw stuff up, and he gets so darn mad, and I say, take it out of my pay.
If I was Chris, I'd be making him pay to come to work.
We're desperate.
So whenever you, correct me if I'm wrong on the time frame here, but whenever you retired from full-time boilermaking in 2010, wasn't too long after that, you kind of turned the farming operation over to the boys, didn't you?
Oh, yeah. Well, I probably turned it over for them, didn't I, or not?
No, you know, in 95, 96, you rented just 1 or 2 farms there,
Yeah,
sites.
yeah.
And then about 96, 97, when I was getting to a senior in high school, we started renting. That's when we took up Finley, Kunkler, Casey.
Well,
Our row crop started,
it really blew up when you come home.
you know.
When you come home is when it really blew up.
'Cause you were at the
That was,
sprinkler
yeah,
union.
sprinkler.
Yeah, I've been a 5-year apprenticeship school for the fire protection sprinkler fitter union. I think I worked 2 days as a journeyman, then I drug up and come home.
Yeah.
But I had some side truck driving jobs after that. But 2010 was a rough year for us on the farm. 2015 hit hard, and then that's when you turned to checkbooks. That's when I started doing.
I'll have to try to get you to understand when you're a first generation farmer, which I'm going to call myself, first generation farmer, when you're sitting there with nothing and you're trying to grow, it is so hard
Yeah.
to make that checkbook balance. And finally, I just got so fed up, I said, the heck with it. I threw the checkbook at him and I said, it's yours. I'm done with it. But there's not any more stress than an individual starting off with nothing and farming and getting to where we are today. It is very, very stressful.
February of 2015 is when we ran across our new bank,
Yeah.
and that's when I started taking over.
I made the comment that Shirley and I, we had all farm income. We never took one dime off the farm. We kept putting it back in, putting it back in. Never took a dime off the farm. And
There's a lot of differences there, but there's some truth to the statement you just made too. If you're going to start any business from scratch,
yes, yes,
that we had this conversation in a previous podcast. People have this perception if you're self-employed, you're automatically rich, and it's probably the farthest thing from the truth. It takes a long time to get established. There's some home runs out there, but it takes a long time to get stuff established where you got good cash flow and you got equity in the business and things start equaling out.
And I ain't saying we're any, even from your perspective or your business that you grew, you know, you're buying equipment, you're buying stuff. Mother Nature doesn't fluctuate your business maybe quite as much.
Well, yes, that is correct, and then it's a little bit more predictable on my end.
And then you get to set your fee or price for doing the job.
Yeah, and if
To where farming, we buy everything retail.
yeah,
Mother Nature fluctuates production.
Yeah.
And then we sell everything wholesale at a price that's
Out of your
already
control.
established that we have no,
Control over.
no,
we
yeah.
sell it at a loss because
Yeah.
we have no control over it.
No, the more I know about farming, the more happy I am I'm not in farming.
I've said all along the biggest problem with
But
the
we love
farmer
farmers.
Yes, but we love farmers.
is that they have painted too good of a picture.
Yeah.
We paint a picture out of this world where the people on the outside are looking in, and the picture they're seeing is not accurate. it's not accurate at
Well,
all.
and farming is, the cycles are off. You'll have 2 good years for 3 bad years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of times
Yeah.
you try to have 3 good years and maybe 2 bad years, but you
Yeah.
guys are flip-flopped. So whenever you guys do have those good years, you really got to think ahead to what's coming down the pipeline. And then you're also at the mercy of a lot of legislation and trades and tariffs and everything else, which really don't affect me as much, I mean, especially tariffs. I'm not selling anything overseas.
Yeah.
Well, the
Or is
government
farming.
plays a big
Not
part
yet.
in the
Not yet,
farming industry. Whether they know it or not, they play a big part in agriculture. Because without them,
Well, one thing I want to clear up about what you guys do too is it's just like your yellow corn. Everybody thinks it's food, but it is in soybeans. It's in so many other daily products, makeup, cereal,
Yeah.
anything.
they started this ethanol thing years ago, and we was at a family reunion. My uncle was telling me how mad he was about ethanol. And I said, why are you mad? He said, well, that corn should be going for food. And I said, now, wait a minute. I said, they just pull out of that kernel what they want for that ethanol, and then the rest of it goes back into food. Well, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of people don't know that.
Well, that's because that's one of the major disadvantages of social media is you can put out there just what you want to, and then all of a sudden it's gospel and nobody does the research to follow up behind. And the next thing you know, you got this false narrative going, and here we are.
Yeah.
Here we are. So, yeah. Anyway, getting back to our conversation here. Whenever we show up on a Farmer Chris job and Pat's involved, there is still a dispute about who's in charge between these two.
It's interesting. The last cube stacking job you did was gets a lot of comments. When are you gonna bring him a radio to the job site with you?
I got one back
if that
there
happens,
too.
my ass is going to be on a different channel.
Hey, I don't get it.
I don't either. You know he couldn't change the channel.
Oh, yes, I
He's gonna be
can.
sitting there on there, oh, man, I want to be just
Wonder
like
what they're
them.
saying about me.
I don't care.
You know exactly what. Where can we get a good operator? This is a bunch of bull right now.
He starts mentioning about my operator. I just get out of the seat and say, go for it. No, you do fine.
They was doing a job up there at the Lynch farm, and they was quitting for the day, and Jerry and him fueled their machines up. And Jerry got done, and he went over at Mike's machine. He said, Mike, you gonna put your fuel cap back on? And I said, see, Mike, that's the difference between union and non-union.
You know what? I'm going to send him 2 bills one day, the difference between union and non-union. We'll see who gets the last laugh on this one, Pat. The funny part is, Pat shows up on the job, and for the next hour and a half after you leave, that Pat, he's just going on top of that. I'm like, focus, kid, just focus right here.
Get you stirred up, don't he?
Oh yeah.
You got him filmed being the king of the mountain, didn't you?
But you know when Pat pulls up to a job, he'll pull up to a job. He don't say a word. He's just looking, and it's just, man, if I could just see them, hear them thoughts that are going through his head right now, I'd give $1 million.
I think if you get a Dixie cup and some rocks and shake it around, it probably sounds like
He's over thinking, I wonder what I'm doing wrong.
Best part, I told him he needed gloves on. He didn't listen. That about lost a finger. But we had a bad operator that day.
so. The one day that comes to my mind, we got to wrap this up at some point. So I pulled the tile plowing too.
And Pat had to be there.
Literally, Aaron's in an outage working. I pulled this.
He welded the tile plow up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's in an outage working. I pull the tile plow too. Pat pulls in the driveway like 30 seconds after this happens. Walks up to him, he's just shaking his head. He goes, that boy. Gets in his truck and drives off.
For the record, my welds were great.
You didn't even put your number on it.
No, I did not put my stencil number on. I didn't on that one either. That one I did get my number all over it. That one turned out pretty good. We got the background here.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, until you put it to use.
We're gonna find out, Chris.
Yeah.
All right. Well, before we wrap this one up, is there anything else we want to cover?
Well, there's always another day.
There's always another day. We may have to go around 2 on this one. I think we just now got up to the current event.
Yeah.
But all right. Well, first off, gentlemen, thanks for keeping the lights on for all these years.
Chris, next time you're gonna have to take a little more charge. You're gonna have to tell us to, hey, shut up.
No, you're good. You're doing fine.
Yeah.
So, and I think we got a few more episodes coming this year yet.
Yep.
Still trying to rackle up Farmer Grace. May try to get Bridget on here, and we're going to do a deep dive behind the scenes of Farmer Chris's operation because a lot of people have been asking about that. So, as always, guys, thanks for watching.
Can Pat run the show on that one?
Can Pat run the show on that one?
Yeah.
I don't know how well the audio is going to be through a radio.
We'll make it work, I promise.
That's what
Oh, he'll make it work.
you need a radio on during this podcast.
Make both of them feel at home.
Yeah.
All right, I'm sorry. You got to get
that's-
this thing wrapped up.
Well, Pat, appreciate you coming by. Farmer Chris. We're going to wrap this one up.
Yep.
We'll catch you guys on the next one.